All right, let's dive into something every EMT knows is crucial, but maybe doesn't always get the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
Safe patient handling.
Right on.
We've got some great EMT training materials to dig into, especially
Yeah.
those chapters from emergency care and transportation of the sick and injured.
It's the Bible.
And honestly, you wouldn't have sent this over for a deep dive if you weren't serious about having a long, healthy career.
You're absolutely right. And, this is something even seasoned EMTs, we can all use a refresher on. It's easy to get complacent.
It's true because, look, I saw a statistic that floored me. Back injuries
Oh, yeah.
are the #1 reason EMTs and paramedics have to leave the job.
I believe it.
We're not talking a few weeks of discomfort here. We're talking career-ending, system-wide impact.
Oh, it's a hidden cost, for sure. You think about the dramatic stuff, the emergencies, but honestly, it's the day-to-day wear and tear.
Right.
That lifting and moving, overtime,
Yeah.
chronic pain, disability. You can't do the job you love.
Exactly. And the ripple effect.
Mm.
One EMT down means colleagues are slammed, patients might wait longer, so prevention is key. What struck me in these materials was just how many different situations
Oh, tell me about it.
EMTs face, right?
Every day's different.
Car crash 1 minute,
Totally.
cramped apartment the next.
Yep.
Maybe even wilderness rescue.
You never know.
Each one, you need a different approach.
Absolutely. Understanding the equipment, mastering the techniques. That's essential for any EMT, no matter the situation.
So let's start with, I guess, the workhorse of it all. The wheeled ambulance stretcher. Seems so simple, right?
Bed on wheels, right?
Just a bed on wheels.
It's deceiving. More complex than people realize, and those things can weigh anywhere from 40 to 145 pounds.
Wait, 145 pounds? That's like lifting, what, a whole other person?
It's a person, depending on the model and the features.
Wow.
You can't just grab them anywhere. Knowing the right grip points on that frame, understanding how that undercarriage folds up,
I was going to ask about that.
how to lock those wheels. Those are crucial details.
For sure, for sure. The undercarriage, I never really thought about that being something you adjust.
It's key for height adjustment, which of course is important for patient comfort and transfer. Some models even have hydraulic systems.
Fancy.
But you know what? You got to know that manual operation. What happens when those systems fail?
Absolutely. Got to be prepared for anything. What about, like, the mattress itself? I mean, obviously it's got to be easy to clean,
Yeah,
but there's got to be more to it than that, right?
absolutely. It's not just about spills. That fluid-resistant material, we're talking infection control here.
Right, right.
Bloodborne pathogens,
Yeah.
all sorts of bodily fluids, easy cleanup. Crucial to protect both the patient and the EMT.
Makes perfect sense. And of course, let's not forget those straps. Securing the patient, that's not just about comfort.
No way.
That's a safety issue.
Big time. Imagine a rough patch of road or, God forbid, an accident. Those straps could be the difference between, a bumpy ride and a serious injury.
It's like the seatbelt of the stretcher. We did see some stuff about the newer stretchers,
Oh, yeah.
automatic loading systems.
Game changer.
Have you gotten to work with those?
I have. They're amazing.
Hmm.
Push-button operation, either battery or air pressure, significantly reduces the risk of injury
That's incredible.
for both the EMT and the patient,
Yeah.
especially during transfer.
That's huge because, I mean, that's got to be one of the riskiest moments.
Definitely.
But we've got to be real. EMTs need to know how to function even if they don't have those fancy new
Oh, 100%.
systems.
100%. As amazing as those are, you got to understand the mechanics of that standard stretcher. That's non-negotiable.
Absolutely. Which brings us to those other tools of the trade.
Oh, yeah.
You've got your backboards, your stair chairs, scoop stretchers.
It's a whole toolkit.
It's like a whole kit you got to be ready to use.
And knowing when and how to use them,
Yes.
that's key to doing this job safely.
So backboards, those are the classics, right?
Yeah.
Still around for a reason.
Absolutely. Super versatile for immobilizing patients, especially if you suspect a spinal. You'll find them in different materials now, from your classic plywood to lighter, more durable plastics these days. But we are seeing a bit of a shift away from backboards.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, think about it. Strapped to a hard board, even a fancy modern one for who knows how long.
Not the most comfortable.
Exactly. Vacuum mattresses are gaining popularity.
Okay.
They provide a much more comfortable, contoured experience, and especially for longer transports. They really conform to the body. Better support, pressure distribution, it's a win-win.
It makes sense. Okay, so what about the other stuff? You've got the stair chair, which Seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yes.
There are stoop stretchers, even those flexible ones that look like they could go anywhere.
They're great.
Each one seems so specific.
Oh, absolutely. So that's stair chair, right? That's for navigating those narrow stairwells,
Yeah.
maybe inclines, especially with a conscious patient who can sit upright. The scoop stretcher, that's your best friend in tight spaces. Elevators, narrow hallways, you got to move someone quickly, don't have the time or space for log rolling. That's your go-to.
Wow, and those flexible ones, those are like action movie almost.
I know. They're incredible. Confined space rescues, collapsed buildings, even wilderness rescues. You got to rappel down a cliff with a patient. Lightweight, durable. You can maneuver them around obstacles that would stop a traditional stretcher dead in its tracks.
Amazing. There's a whole world of equipment. But one thing in here really caught my eye, and that's the neonatal isolette. That's not your average stretcher.
Not at all.
That's for the tiniest patients.
The tiniest, most vulnerable, those newborns. Think of it as a mobile intensive care unit, but for infants.
So it's more than just a tiny stretcher.
Oh yeah, it regulates temperature, humidity, minimizes noise, light stimulation.
Oh, wow.
All those things that can be overwhelming for a newborn, especially preemies or those with medical conditions.
It's a whole other level of care right there.
It is.
Wow, that's amazing. It just highlights the different challenges you face.
Yeah.
But even with all the best equipment in the world,
Yeah.
it really comes down to the EMT's judgment,
It
right?
does. You have to assess what's the patient's weight, their condition, the environment you're in, your resources.
And what about the EMT themselves? That's got to factor in, right?
Absolutely. Your body is your primary tool for lifting and moving these patients.
And that's what these materials emphasize so much.
Yeah.
It's not just about brute force.
Go.
It's understanding leverage mechanics, knowing your limits.
Your body's a machine, right?
Right.
And like any machine, it has limitations. Knowing what they are and working within them, that's key to preventing injuries.
Absolutely. So let's break that down for our listener. Body mechanics. Where does that start?
So you got to understand those core muscles.
Mhm.
Your back, your abs, your legs.
Okay.
They work as a team. They support your spine. They generate power for lifting.
And posture. How important is that?
Oh, it's huge.
I imagine it's crucial.
Crucial. Straight back, shoulders relaxed, head up.
Right.
This isn't just about looking professional.
Right.
This is about protecting your spine.
Yeah, I've heard so many stories about EMTs throwing out their back, and it's like
yeah.
from improper
More
lifting.
common than you think.
Yeah.
Bending at the waist instead of the knees, that's a big one. Twisting while you're lifting.
Mhm.
Overreaching.
Okay.
These are the mistakes that put a ton of stress on that spine, and that's where you get strains, sprains, herniated discs.
And that can be long-term problems, so
Sure.
you've got to do it right. And that's where the power lift comes in.
That's the gold standard.
Okay.
It minimizes that stress on your back. It uses the power of your legs and core to do the work.
Smart. All right, so walk me through this. Power lift, step by step. What are we doing?
Okay, first of all, get close to the patient.
Okay.
Feet shoulder width apart. You need that stable base.
Makes sense.
And remember, keep the weight as close to your body as you can.
Right, because the further away it is,
The more strain on your back.
the more strain. Okay, so we're close, feet apart. What's next?
All right, now you're going to squat down, bending at those knees. Keep
Okay.
that back straight. This is where people mess up. They bend at the waist.
Right, and that's when you're using your back to do all the work.
Exactly. So knees bent, back straight. Now you get a good grip on the stretcher, the lifting device. Make sure your hands are comfortable and secure.
They talked about the power grip. Is that what you're talking about?
That's it. That's maximizing your grip strength, protecting those wrists.
Okay.
Think about holding the handle with your palms facing up.
Okay.
Thumbs extended, the handle resting in that crease of your palm.
Okay.
This lines up your wrists, your forearms. You can exert more force safely.
Wow. These little details make a huge difference.
Huge. Okay, so grip is secure. Take a deep breath, brace your core, and lift with your legs, keeping that back straight. It's like you're pushing up from the ground, not pulling that weight. And as you stand, keep that weight close, no twisting.
Smooth and controlled, right.
Exactly, like a hydraulic lift, not some jerky crane.
Not a crane. And of course, don't be afraid to say, hey, I need a hand with this one.
Never.
Even with perfect technique, some things, you just need a team.
100%.
Speaking of teamwork, we saw a lot about communication in these materials.
Oh, yeah.
When you've got multiple EMTs, that's got to be so important. No room for assumptions, right?
None. You have to be like a single unit,
Wow.
especially with a critical patient or a difficult environment. You need that clear communication to keep everyone safe.
So it's almost like you're all doing a choreographed dance.
That's a great way to put it. Everyone knows their steps.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the cues. That's how you avoid missteps and injuries. And just like a dance troupe, you got to have a leader.
They called it the team leader for the lift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That person assesses the situation. What's the plan? What could go wrong? They're thinking about the patient's weight, their condition, how much space you have, any obstacles, and then they decide, okay, who's doing what based on everyone's strengths.
Smart. And then there's that moment right before you lift,
Oh, yeah.
just to make sure everybody's ready.
Critically important.
Yeah.
That's where your preparatory commands come in.
Right. They gave the example, ready to lift, and then a pause. What's that pause for? Just catching your breath.
It's more than that. It's that final check-in. Everyone takes a second. Am I in the right position? Is my grip good? Am I ready? It builds that focus. You don't want someone jumping the gun.
That makes sense. And then, boom, you get the command to go.
Exactly. Something short and sharp. Lift.
Everybody moves together.
You got it. Smooth and controlled.
That's wild. It's almost ritualistic, you know?
It is.
You build that teamwork, that confidence.
Exactly. And you need that, especially with those urgent moves, like that rapid extrication technique.
Okay, let's talk about that, because for our listener, that's when speed is key, even if it means maybe not doing the full spinal immobilization right away.
You got it. High risk, high reward.
Yeah.
It's for those really dire situations where being in the vehicle is more dangerous than the potential risk of moving them. Fire, hazmat spills, situations like that.
So you're saying getting them out of harm's way trumps even that risk of maybe a little bit of spinal movement?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why this takes a highly trained, coordinated team, usually 3 EMTs,
Okay.
each with a very specific role.
It's like a pit crew in racing. Every second counts.
Exactly. So EMT number 1, they take manual control of the patient's head and neck,
Okay.
inline stabilization. So usually they're positioned behind a patient. They're carefully supporting that head, maintaining that spinal alignment as much as possible.
And this is all while the person's still in the vehicle.
Still seated. It's quick, efficient, and you're working in a very small space.
Right.
EMT number 2, often the team leader in the situation. They're the communicator, making sure everyone's on the same page, and they're supporting the patient's torso. They might apply a cervical collar at this stage, if possible.
So you've got head and neck. You've got torso. What's the third EMT doing?
They're the leg person, making
Oh.
sure those legs are clear of any obstructions, the pedals, the steering wheel. And then as the patient's moved, they're carefully rotating those legs in sync with the rest of the body.
Oh, so it's all about that synchronized movement,
Exactly. Minimizing any twisting or jarring,
guided by that team leader.
always. And don't forget, those commands, they're not just about timing. They're also reassuring the patient.
Oh, absolutely. Because they got to be terrified.
Of course. So clear communication, that's for both the team and the patient. Now, once they're rotated, a backboard is often, but not always, used for that rigid support.
Okay, so it's not automatic. It depends.
It might depend on the EMT's specific protocols, how the patient's presenting, the mechanism of injury. So let's say they do use a backboard. It's carefully positioned, usually against the buttocks. The team gently lowers the patient onto it, all while maintaining that spinal alignment as best they can.
That's a delicate dance.
It really is. Then it's getting that backboard onto the stretcher, patient secured. And remember, if you're doing this to escape danger, you're moving that stretcher to a safe location immediately. Then you can do a full assessment and treatment.
It's seamless, driven by the situation.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with your non-urgent moves.
Right, where you actually have time to breathe a little.
You have time to plan. You can really minimize the risk.
So maybe someone who's fallen at home?
Maybe they've broken a hip, they're in pain, but there's no immediate danger. That's when those mental checklists we talked about are even more important.
Take those extra few seconds to think, okay, how heavy is this person? How mobile are they? Are there any injuries we need to be aware of? How much space do we have? What equipment do we have? How many hands on deck?
Exactly. All those factors go into the team leader's decision-making.
Right, because even in a non-urgent situation, the wrong move could make things worse.
Absolutely. So some common techniques for non-urgent moves: the direct ground lift, pretty self-explanatory.
On the ground up.
Patients on the ground, no suspicion of spinal.
Okay,
Maybe they fainted, maybe a diabetic episode, but otherwise stable.
got it.
So direct ground lift. Safe, efficient way to get them to the stretcher. You ideally want 3 EMTs for this.
Okay.
One at the head, one at the waist, one at the knees.
Okay.
They all kneel down on one side, making sure they have a good grip. Team leader gives the commands, and they lift together.
Like one unit.
Exactly, keeping that alignment. Another one is the extremity lift. This is good for patients who are supine or sitting,
Hmm.
but in a tight space where you can't all fit side by side.
Small apartment, small room, something like that.
Exactly. Again, best when you're not worried about spinal or extremity injuries.
Okay, so how does that one work?
So one EMT at the head, one at the feet. The head EMT, they gently lift the torso to a sitting position, supporting that head and neck the whole time. At the same time, the foot EMT is supporting the legs, lifting slightly to clear the ground as they bring them to standing.
Coordinated, upper body, lower body working together.
You got it. Then, both EMTs standing, they carefully walk that patient to the stretcher, communicating the whole way, making sure they're stable and supported.
I imagine that one takes a bit more upper body strength.
It can, but remember, it's always a team lift.
Mm.
And even though it's non-urgent, you still need that communication, those good mechanics, to avoid hurting yourself.
Absolutely. We've talked about lifting from the ground, lifting from sitting, but what about transferring from a bed
Oh yeah, good point.
to a stretcher or the other way around?
So one of the simplest is the direct carry. Again, pretty self-explanatory.
Just pick them up and move them.
2 or more EMTs, you're carefully lifting that patient from the bed, carrying them to the stretcher. Simple in theory, but you still need that coordination, that communication to make sure they're aligned and supported.
Right. It's not as simple as it sounds. What about when someone's too heavy for that, or if even a little movement is super painful?
That's when you break out the draw sheet method.
Okay.
This is where you're using a sheet or a blanket underneath them to help with the transfer.
So it's like a lifting aid.
Exactly. Reducing friction, distributing that weight more evenly. Key thing is to make sure it's centered underneath them, everyone's got a good grip, and then on the team leader's command, you gently slide them onto the stretcher.
Oh, that's got to be so much better for someone who's fragile or in a lot of pain.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And we can't forget our trusty scoop stretcher.
Right. The classic.
So versatile,
Hmm.
especially in those tight spaces or when you need to move quickly without log rolling.
For our listeners who've never actually seen it, what is a scoop stretcher?
Basically, it's a stretcher that splits apart. 2 or 4 sections, kind of like a clamshell. You put those sections around the patient, lock them together, and boom, you've got a secure platform to lift them onto a backboard or straight onto the stretcher.
Oh, so it's much gentler.
It can be, especially if you're worried about the spine,
Right.
and it's great for when you're short-staffed because 2 EMTs can usually handle it.
That's really helpful. We've covered so much. From basic body mechanics to, wow, all this specialized stuff. It's a whole science.
It really is. And it's always evolving.
It really makes you think being a good EMT, it's more than just the physical stuff or even just knowing the techniques.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that human element, that compassion.
100%.
Yeah.
You're often the first one on scene when someone is having one of the worst days of their life. You know, they're injured, scared, confused, maybe all 3.
And you're a stranger. In those moments, those soft skills, that's what can make all the difference.
Totally. Being calm, reassuring, a good listener, that can make all the difference in the world for someone who is already feeling vulnerable.
It's true. You're treating the whole person, not just the injury. And I imagine sometimes, even with the best intentions, things can get a little unpredictable.
Yeah,
The materials talked about handling patients who are combative or confused, maybe from a head injury, a medical condition, even medication.
definitely. You have to be so aware in those situations.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act, keeping everyone safe, the patient, yourself, bystanders, and trying to de-escalate the situation.
And sometimes that means using restraints,
Yeah,
which I know is a sensitive topic,
it is.
but it's something you have to be prepared for.
Absolutely. And everything we've read emphasizes that restraints, those are a last resort.
Right. Only when absolutely necessary.
Exactly. Only to prevent harm. And even then, you're applying them correctly, following the protocols to a T, constantly monitoring the patient.
Right, because that can affect their breathing,
Absolutely.
their circulation, their mental state.
You're constantly assessing, adjusting, and documenting everything. Why you're using the restraints, what type, how they're responding, any changes in their condition.
Right. Transparency, accountability. It's a good reminder, being an EMT, it's not just the hands-on stuff.
No,
It's these big ethical, even legal things you have to be aware of.
it all comes with the territory. And, you know, another thing that we don't talk about enough, I think, is the psychological impact on the patient.
That's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up because we can get so focused on the technical, we forget that.
Right. So put yourself in their shoes for a minute. They're hurt, probably scared, in pain. They're in a strange place, surrounded by people they don't know, and their body is being moved around.
Yeah.
It can be really disorienting and scary.
It's easy to lose sight of that, for sure.
Exactly. But even small things. Little gestures of empathy, reassurance can make a world of difference.
Like explaining what you're going to do before you do it.
Yes.
Mm.
Asking if they're comfortable,
Yes.
checking their pain level, little things like that.
Just acknowledging them as a person.
Exactly, not just a patient. Use their name, make eye contact, even just a reassuring touch on the arm. These things build trust and reduce anxiety.
That human connection, it's powerful medicine on its own.
It really is. It
Yeah.
goes back to what we were saying. Those soft skills are not just some nice bonus.
Right.
They're essential tools for good patient care.
So for our listener out there who's either already living this EMT life or maybe thinking about it,
Yeah.
what are the big takeaways from our deep dive here on safe patient handling?
I think the biggest one is recognizing that this is an ongoing process. It's not something you just learn once and you're good.
It's always evolving.
Exactly. You're always learning, practicing, adapting to new situations. And it's not just about being strong. It's about being smart, being compassionate. It's about mastering those techniques, but also having that empathy, that communication.
And I think it's also about remembering to take care of yourself in this job,
Oh, 100%.
which, let's be honest, EMTs are famous for not doing.
Yeah, we're not always the best at that.
But you have to. Listen to your body. Know when you've reached your limit. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Couldn't agree more. And, as technology keeps developing, we're going to keep seeing new equipment, new ways of doing things. Who knows what the future holds?
That's exciting though, right? It's a whole new frontier for EMS.
It is. It's exciting. But one thing will always be true, no matter what cool gadgets we have, that commitment to safe, effective, and compassionate care. That's the heart of EMS.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. To everyone listening, thanks for joining us. And remember, keep that learning going.